Hello everyone and welcome to the 14th edition of FairTalk, our quarterly gathering of professionals committed to ethical storytelling in the development and humanitarian sectors. Today we are addressing a topic of growing relevance in our community: ethical fundraising in a time of non-profit cuts. FairTalk is hosted by Fairpicture, the platform for ethical custom visual content production and the developer of the Fair Consent app, the most efficient and ethical way to collect and manage informed consent. You can find more information about Fairpicture in the description of this video or in the caption, depending on the platform you are watching it. In this session, we are pleased to welcome 5 voices from the community, each bringing their own insights and experiences into how ethical storytelling can support more effective, values-aligned fundraising. Kate Moja is a senior leader at Adesso and the Pledge for Change. She has spent 2 decades working with large international NGOs and has lived in the African continent since 2007. David Gerling is an associate professor at the University of East Anglia, where he also serves as postgraduate admissions director, director of employability, study abroad coordinator, and MSc Global Development Management course director. Riani Singgih is a documentary producer and director whose short films have been screened at over 50 festivals worldwide. She is particularly interested in telling stories about identity and the idea of home, and she's part of her picture network of visual creators. Brahmantioputra is a documentary filmmaker and impact producer. He co-founded 710 Media in Jakarta and Stories of Us, both dedicated to supporting local visual storytellers in Indonesia. And he's part of Fairpicture network of visual creators as well. Nadia Gianoli leads the development and implementation of the communication strategy at Urbamonde. And I'm Laura, marketing lead at Fairpicture. So let's now hear directly from our panelists as they introduce themselves and share their reflections.
Thanks, Laura, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Great to see so many of you on this call. My name's Kate Moja, and I work for an organization called Adesso from Nairobi, Kenya, on an initiative called the Pledge for Change. And I'm really pleased to be here on the topic of ethical fundraising during a time of budget cuts. So I wanted to start off by acknowledging that these are really difficult times, I'm sure, for many of the people on the call, that people are impacted in all sorts of different ways. And the ethical communication and ethical fundraising can be really challenging. We've seen some technical challenges of communication. Borema, je vois que vous voulez vraiment parler dans cet espace. So I hope we'll have time to hear from everyone and hear the different perspectives on ethical communications as we go through. I'm going to talk briefly about the initiative called the Pledge for Change, which brings together 12 international NGOs and 78 organizations and a number of individuals from across the aid ecosystem who have a shared vision of a stronger aid ecosystem based on the principles of solidarity, humility, equality, and self-determination. The INGOs have committed to changing the ways in which they operate, including in how they tell stories. So there's a baked-in understanding into the Pledge for Change that the narratives that we use, the stories that we tell about aid and about the work of development and change in the world, impact how we think about it, how we raise money about it, who gets to say what good is and what stories should be told. We'd be very happy to talk to anyone who wants more information about the pledge generally in a separate session. But today I'm going to focus on the authentic storytelling part of our accountability and learning mechanism. So Laura, the screens, you've got a few pieces open, so I don't know if you want to put it into presentation mode. But if we can go to the slide before and look at the one about the palm. This is the Pledge for Change accountability and learning mechanism, which is the way that we've co-created with partners from the global majority and the international NGOs of monitoring whether or not the INGOs are keeping their promises. So it's a multiple data source, mixed methodology way of measuring progress. And again, we can share more details about that for anyone who's interested. But the piece I think that relates to today's conversation is that we have a review panel of experts in decolonized communications who are looking at the communications and fundraising materials of all of our signatories and assessing those through an anti-colonial, anti-racist communications lens to understand whether or not the INGOs are perpetuating harmful narratives and therefore harm for the people that they are supposed to be supporting, or challenging and reframing those narratives. And I think the important thing in a moment of pressure or crisis, as we're experiencing right now, where people are feeling very concerned about funding, about the survival of their organizations, about the continuation of their own roles, there's a risk that we go back to savior narratives and that we use some of the tropes and some of the images of certain parts of the international system being able to rescue or save or care for other parts and dismiss the agency and the work that's happening always in all communities. So this panel, as part of a broader process, comes in to conduct a review of selected communications products against a series of indicators looking at how ethical, inclusive, representative, and giving credit to local and national organizations' contributions and the ways in which they avoid reinforcing harmful stereotypes. We were ecstatic to pull together this amazing panel. The next slide shows you who they are, bringing a range of perspectives from across geographies, from across different kind of specialisms. I know a number of the people on this slide work with Fairpicture in different capacities as well. So there's lots of linkages between what we do. And they worked through a very thoughtful and principled process in which they designed a rubric, which is what you can see on the next slide, to guide that review process. And again, this is co-created, co-sourced, but agreeing the criteria through which they're going to look at the communications material to think about those questions of who's included and represented and who isn't. How does white saviorism and homogenization show up? What can we see about the white gaze or a very Eurocentric positioning around the narratives, the stories that are being told? Are the communications products avoidant of questions of coloniality, or do we acknowledge historical and political context in which aid or development interventions are happening? And do we communicate fully on those contexts, or do we assume that people are dying in X place without naming that there are perpetrators of violence and harm? There are political and social and economic reasons why this harm is happening. And that links to the imagery and the language choices that are used. So just very quickly to share some of the findings from the first round of the reviews. I think an important thing to say is that the INGO partners in this were worried about this process. They felt anxious that they were going to receive a critique or that this was going to feel somehow punitive. And what we've tried to create is much more of a dialogue, recognizing that nobody has understood fully how to do this. We're talking about complex power dynamics baked into complex systems. And so the panel have found that all of the signatories to the Pledge for Change are committed to authentic storytelling. They want to be genuine, accurate, and trustworthy, and reflect those complexities of human experience. But we have very little harm and very little attention. We have very little clarity and very little attention is paid to what do we mean by harm and exploitation, and who gets to decide. We know that the challenges of development as a construct that considers racial and gendered inequity are still poorly understood. And so what the panel found is that most of the communications products that they reviewed are still happening within these problematic boundaries. We're not pushing the limits of our understanding of where the narratives could change. And I think that's particularly true in this moment where even the words that we're allowed to use are under assault. We have banned words lists coming out from the US government, for example, that make people more nervous or more likely to revert to normative discourse. And so the recommendations that they've given us are to introduce more of the contributor's direct voice. People speak for themselves, which feels obvious but seems hard to do in INGO communications. Provide that socioeconomic and political context, acknowledge historic and present racial injustices, set out the contributions and name all of the stakeholders, all of the people who are contributing can all be named and equally credited. It's not just a space for INGOs to acknowledge their work. Balance the very real survival challenges that people are facing with their agency and people's ability to find solutions to their problems. Avoid homogenistic language when describing people and places, and spend more time crediting and captioning contributions are some of the recommendations that they gave us. There's a lot more that I could say, but I'm not going to now because I know we have other great speakers. So that's it from me. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Kate. David, would you like to continue with your presentation?
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks for that, Kate. So I'll follow on a bit from what Kate has said, because my research is sort of very, very similar in some ways. I'm interested in who gets included and who isn't, which is what Kate said. So my name is David Gurley. I'm an associate professor at the University of East Anglia. I teach media and global development in the School of Global Development. And I consider myself a pracademic. I'm a practitioner more than an academic, and I moved into academia about 15 years ago. The slides have gone.
Wait a second again.
Oh, there they are. So yeah, I was actually writing a blog, Social Media for Development. That was something I was really, really interested in. And at the time, I interviewed a wonderful organisation, Say in Norway, who came up with a campaign called Radiaid. If you haven't heard of Radiaid, please look it up on YouTube. It's absolutely hilarious. And it challenges stereotypes within charities and NGOs. And they created what's called the Radiaid Awards, which I can't really go into, but I was on a panel for those Radiaid Awards, and we did lots of wonderful things. Lots of charities in the UK were changing their communications. There was a lot of press internationally, loads in the UK. And after a while, I sort of said, you know, one of the things I've been really, really interested in is the majority of the images that I see are in Africa. Has anybody actually been to speak to contributors, the people in the pictures, and ask them how they feel. So we did a piece of research, went to 6 different African countries and asked people their thoughts. So if I could go to the next slide. These are some of the images. You know, I was gathering images at the time. I just showed 10 images we had 6 different focus groups to ask what they thought of these kinds of images. So we had 3 positive, 3 negative, 3 neutral, and 1 without an image at all. Next slide, please. And I'd seen a piece of research by a master's student in the US who'd been to Uganda, and who basically just showed a very, very, you know, simple thing: a positive image, a negative image, and a neutral image. And we replicated this. We used a photographer in Uganda who is an Everyday Africa photographer, Edward Achwalu. He took a photograph. The text was deliberately the same, but I realized that that was a problem with my methodology. And we asked people, what would you choose if you were advertising? Next slide, please. And the key findings were that in those images that I've shown you, people felt really sad about those images because they said that they were an accurate representation of the situation in Africa. But they would choose negative imagery. This is something we were hoping that we wouldn't find in our research. They were saying if they were trying to fundraise, they would use negative imagery. But, and I'm not going to read everything out here because this is all available online, they would use children. So that, you know, once again, that's something that we were hoping that they wouldn't say. But they said, and this, I think this final bullet point here, is that there needed to be more diversity. And so that's what Kate was saying. Who's included and who isn't? Who's telling their stories? They were saying, you know, this was in South Africa. They were saying there's white people here in poverty. So why are Black people the poster children of poverty and inequality? We were brought up by our grandparents. Why aren't we showing grandparents? Why aren't we showing whole family units? Next slide, please, Laura. And so following on from this, I was presenting this and I presented the findings to a number of different people, including someone very, very senior in a large NGO that I won't name, who was director of fundraising and alumnus from our school. And they said, it's great that you want to do all this and that you want to test everything, but you've got to do it in a live market. And so I met Rachel Erskine from AMREF UK and was telling her my ideas, and I had a bit of funding. And she was like, yeah, great, I'd like to work with you. Let's test participant-led storytelling. So I contacted Jess Crombie, who's worked for Save the Children and worked on a wonderful piece of research called The People in the Pictures. And together we decided that we were going to go over to Kibera in Nairobi, and we were going to teach some community health workers how to use cameras to tell their own stories and test it against professional fundraisers. Next slide, please, Laura. And so unfortunately COVID hit, so me and Jess couldn't go. So Natalia in the top left here with her almost brand new baby strapped to her chest did a training course for 4 community health workers, and they went out to tell whatever stories they wanted. Hardly any of them had ever taken a photograph before. They'd never done fundraising. We said, this is a blank canvas. You've got a sheet of A4 folded in half into a 4-page A5 booklet. You can have 1 image or you can have 100 images. It's up to you. Next slide, please. And we also hired Brian Otieno, another Everyday Africa photographer, to take some professional images. And what we did is we then designed packs with the community health worker. We could only choose 1. And we tested that. We tested the professional fundraising pack designed here in the UK with a professional fundraiser against Patrick, who's here, who literally on WhatsApp chatted to me and Jess, and in 15 minutes came up with a text for his fundraising advert. Next slide, please. And then the slide after that. Those were these photographs, just scrolling past Patrick's photographs. And this was the findings. These are all online. I'll give you a link in a minute. But basically Patrick's pack, somebody who had never taken photographs before professionally, he'd never written fundraising text, it raised more money than the professional pack. And we were delighted at this. It was only a small study, but Jess has gone on to work with the UNHCR since, and that's available online as well. And we believe that participant-led storytelling is the future, and it overcomes lots of the issues that Kate has already mentioned. Next slide, please. So at the same time, I'll whiz through this really, really quickly. Online, I was collecting newspapers in the UK. So I collected for 6 months every single newspaper in the UK to see what adverts you got in newspapers at weekends. And myself and Deborah Adesina, a wonderful graduate from our Media and Global Development course, we analysed all of these adverts. I donated to 10 different charities to see what they would send me. All of this stuff is available online at www.charity-advertising.co.uk. There's a link a bit later, and it gives you there's thousands of images that you can have a look at if you can then scroll. So a few of the findings. First of all, 56% focused on Africa. Why? Why can't they focus on other countries? Next slide. The cast of characters. There's a fantastic book for those of you who want to do some academic writing, Nandita Dogra, Representations of Global Poverty. It was looked at something similar back in 2005, and I wanted to look at whether things had changed. So Deborah and I analysed all the data using the same methodology. What was great is that majority world children has halved, 42% to 21%. Children and women down from 72% to 50%, but it's still high. There's still no family units. Look at the bottom, one advert out of 541. Why? There needs to be more families, more whole family units. Don't focus on women and children all the time. Final couple of slides and I'm done. There's loads of ethical guidelines out there that you can find. Oxfam, Sightsavers, etc. They're all there. But how do you ensure that those ethical guidelines are actually put into practice? That's something that I'm concerned about and hopefully doing my next piece of research on. And the final slide, there are two videos that came out a couple of years ago, Chance for Childhood, Overexposed, and MSF Norway, When You Picture Doctors Without Borders, What Do You See? They're both on YouTube. If you haven't seen them, go and watch them. They're really, really fascinating. But I've put at the top, is it an opportunity to start doing contributor participant-led storytelling, or is it greenwashing? I suppose it completely depends on your stance. When I watch those two videos, I'm a little concerned it's on the greenwashing side. So I'll leave you with that question and hand you back.
Thank you so much, David. Super interesting. And let's go to Nadia, Riani, and Bram to present.
Okay, I will be sharing the presentation, yeah. Let me know when you can see it.
Go ahead.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you, David, for there was a very comprehensive talk that you just had. To introduce myself, my name is Riani. I'm the director producer from 710 Media, and today we'll be talking about our collaboration with in here. There'll be also be Brahmante Putra who will also be talking, and Nadia also from Ubamon, who is going to be talking about the NGO side of our collaboration. And so to as a background, where me and Bram are both the Fairpicture visual creator, and we were approached by Fairpicture to make a video about the urban housing crisis in Indonesia for Ubamons, and the name of the film is called Homes for the People by the People. And the film focuses on the stories of low-income areas in Jakarta, Indonesia. And oops, sorry, I just did something. Hold on, sorry. My bad. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And the film focused on the stories of low-income areas in Jakarta, Indonesia, that we call kampung in Indonesian, and how they were able to use community-led housing system where the home designs are created by the residents. They're also run by the residents. So whatever that they put in this community-led housing will benefit back to them. And this is an important topic as many of the people that we interviewed were victims of eviction. And through this community-led housing, they're able to regain their home and also the community that they really cherish. And so we work with Urbamon, who helped a local NGO also called Ubam Poor Consortium, to help empower and give education to the residents on how to run the community-led housing sustainably. And these are the Urban Poor Consortium, or UPC as for shorten it. And they were also the protagonists of the film as well. And I think I'll talk about also about why this was a great collaboration from our side. Um, in this the making of this film, there were four different um uh four different teams. Basically, it's the Fairpicture team, the Obamon, the production house as me and Bram, the visual creators, and then also the protagonists, UPC, were on board. And I think what made this special was everyone was always looked in all the different stages of the production from the beginning to the end, and no one was really left behind. Even people that we interviewed were always looked in about what is going to happen, what's going to be filmed, and everything. And that thing that was very important in order to build trust and also uh a very strong collaboration and authentic storytelling. And also we were also grateful that even though with all the budget cuts and everything, we were also given the time to do a thorough research and development in the treatment and storytelling process. And we were able to meet the protagonists before in person before the filming, and because of that, we were able to get their perspective also about how their stories want to be told by them, and we were also be able to see the locations for ourselves, and it made everything run smoother in terms of production because we were more ready as well as the visual creator, and we were able to make scheduled a proper scheduled plan, and we were able to communicate also to them about what we want to um, film with them, and they're able to also communicate to us also their boundaries and the kind of things that they also want to be shown in the film. And other than that, also, but since we're talking about budget costs, the budget wise, also became more efficient because we were able to plan out very efficiently about day to day, what we're gonna shoot, uh, and where we're gonna shoot this at, and who the people are involved, so not to waste any time. And last, I think was very important that we were hired as the local people in Jakarta because Bram and I are both from Jakarta, and because I think the most biggest thing is that we were able to give our local knowledge and expertise in this film, and it also helps the budget. I get reduce the budget drastically to become cheaper as we are also from Jakarta as well. And it was much more simpler for us to connect to the people in the video as we are understand how to talk to them culturally, communication, language wise. It was our mother tongue, so it's very easy to do that. And since the project was very much about local life, it was, I think, very important to have people that understood the kind of life that they led, which Bram will talk more about.
Okay,
Ram?
thanks, Riani. Allow me to introduce myself again. I'm the director of the film, which is quite interesting because although Riani was the one who started the project, when I heard it was about urban development, which is something that I'm really passionate about, I decided to step in, and this project quickly became very personal to me. And our client, Urbamon, and obviously like Fairpicture, the agency, trusted us to bring our local perspective to the film. And that trust became like a key point in our process because we just recently found out that Urbamon had shared our profile with UPC beforehand to check on them and to see if they will be comfortable and confident to talk to us. So then after UPC gave their green light for our team, it helped set like a positive tone for our arrival. So the whole process then started, and it began with a pre-interview call with UPC and sketching out our film plan. Because we had to work around the budget and the time, we have tried to get as much information as we can through our calls. We then presented this first draft, this treatment, to both UPC and Urbamon via a Google Meet, since UPC was quite busy in the middle of their programs. Then I think one of the big one of the big moments for us was our first offline meeting with UPC, the characters, because during that first meeting, they brought and introduced us to 5 key individuals from different neighborhoods, which each is at a unique stage of their journey. So these 5 characters have their own unique perspective about the issue at hand. And during that meeting, I pitched the treatment to the group again, like with these characters. And it became clear that this film wasn't just about UPC, the organization. It had to be about the community's real stories. So that time, we actually revised our plan on the spot, like during that meeting, because we want to work around each character's schedules and UPC's main events for the next 4 days because we consider them as important for us as well. Because I think ethically in this whole process, we were all about transparency and open communication and consent. Like consent was a huge part. In Indonesia, a simple form isn't always enough to convey consent. We made sure to verbally explain to every person that we filmed what the film was about and exactly how they'd be portrayed both during the treatment stage and the production stage. So, for example, there was this one woman who used to face eviction, like she was being evicted from her old house by the government, and telling her story could be traumatic. So we prioritized her comfort in sharing it. Like we believe that building strong relationships with UPC and our characters was essential. And by result, it fostered the trust that made people comfortable giving their consent to us. While filming, UPC and the characters we met during that first meeting were always with us in each of these different kampungs. So like each kampung has like one character that we follow. So this gave us immense credibility and trust in the neighborhoods, opening doors to location and other personal stories that we gather on the field. The people and communities were always welcoming as we commute back and forth to these 4 kampungs. This trust also brings us some unexpected benefits because, like budget-wise, commuting from South to North Jakarta was quite expensive during this whole process. So we found a better solution. We teamed up with the residents of one of the kampung, which is Kampung Aquarium, and judging by the cost, we decided to rent a place from them for a night. And living among the villagers, living among the community, wasn't just about saving money. It gave us incredible access and diverse insights, making it easier to shape each character's role in the story. And last but not least, because as I've mentioned, we had to interview a lot of people to make sure that each person has a say in the film. Our interview style had to be very focused and efficient because, as you know, interviews can take ages. And the thing is, we had many people to talk, so we can't waste time with generic questions. We had to tailor our questions and get straight to the point. Since we had to move and interview a couple of people each day, this efficiency also greatly helped in the editing room, because knowing which character was discussing a specific section of the film made it simpler to choose which sound bites and how to construct a story that balanced which character was giving factual information and which character is suitable to give the raw emotion, like the raw hitting emotion beat of the film. And from there, I think I'm gonna pass it to Nadia in how the final film is then, received by Urbamont.
Thank you, Bram and Riani. Thank you, everybody. Also, Kate and David, for the fascinating presentations that you shared. I will go back to a few elements because they are very important, but this is a really, really exciting project, but also not an easy one. It has to do with what we're trying to do, which is basically building trust, what we mentioned a lot, but across continents, across languages, and across power dynamics. And we want to do so ethically, visually, and collaboratively. So at Urbamonde, we support community-led housing initiatives, such as housing cooperatives that Bram mentioned, like the cooperative aquarium, across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And this film, the film project, is about the connection, raising awareness, and hopefully funding. We also hope that. But as for the expectation, maybe participation and the local knowledge are very, very important keywords for us. Local teams understand the context and the culture, they speak the language, and they foster trust more naturally. And we just heard from them. So it really helps shifting the balance of power and making space for more authentic narratives. The narratives, they shape perception. So it's really important to create that space so that these sort of own stories can be told. And in looking for these local teams, we trusted Fairpicture for that. And then 710 Media had the background reporting on social justice issues and an interest in urban development. And as Bram put it himself, they had the local knowledge of the massive infrastructure chaos in Jakarta. And we trusted them with that part as well. So once UPC, the Urban Poor Consortium, were comfortable with also their profile, we were good to go. And then co-creation is really how I would qualify the process. It takes time. On site, meeting people, listening, getting the consent, researching, the boundaries that Riani talked about. Online, sharing ideas, checking in, understanding each other if we had the same understanding of the narrative that we wanted to share. But it's essential. It gives partners ownership of the stories told. And that's where ethics come into play. It shapes what is communicated and, more importantly, how the process is conducted. So the result is a beautiful and engaging 14 minutes film, not a social media snippet. That solution exists, community-led solutions. The process was very, very smooth, thanks to the collaboration of all the parties together, efficient. The project is still very fresh, and we are waiting for funds. So our goal is really to launch a campaign, like bigger campaign to speak to Swiss housing cooperatives, donors, local authorities. The film was shown in Geneva, as you can see on the picture there, but also in Dublin last week at the International Social Housing Festival. It is also being screened by UPC in Indonesia, as they started a 3-month festival to support cooperative housing. It's not online for everyone to see yet, and this is to help with the planned campaign. But as we speak, literally now, it's being shown to funders by my colleagues, and we are confident, though, that we can show why ethical storytelling and our work are important for making a real difference. And despite the funding cuts, this is really the strategy that we want to take forward. So I think I'll stop here so that we can maybe raise the floor to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia, Riani, Bram. Indeed, it's an outstanding film, and thank you for sharing the process. We have some interesting comments in the chat, and also some questions about, someone was asking for David's links. And I also want to mention that we will be sharing resources along with the recording in the next few days to all the registrants. I think our colleague Jörg wanted to raise some questions to the panelists. Jörg, go ahead.
Yes, I have one question to the fundraisers amongst you, so Kate and also the experienced David and you, Nadine. You did this film despite of the funding cuts. And what brought you there to the conviction? Because we see what we can observe on the fundraising market, it's under pressure, and lots of organizations are returning or not leaving the way of some kind of white saviorism communication. They do not dare to do it because they fear that they lose money. And why did you, Nadia, do it in this time, in this difficult time?
Okay, sorry, I was unmuting myself. Thank you. Why? Well, of course, these cuts, they often hit communication and advocacy first, but I think it's, as a communication professional, I strongly believe that these are crucial to building solidarity and mobilizing new allies. So I think it's keeping that value strong. And we, in our research to find the partners that we would do this work together, the ethical storytelling was really one of the key points. So it was also to really look for somebody that was working with those values that could really match our own values. So it just makes sense. Of course, communication is also a very flexible science, which means that you adapt. And for instance, at the moment, the campaign is on hold, but we are continuing. We currently have 2 other films that we are producing through Fairpicture, and we are very confident that this is the way that we can really show impact and really be able to let people tell their own stories, in fact, because we want to make the community talk. And we think that it has a lot more impact despite the cuts where you maybe want to cut on production and do it faster. But I think co-creation really means also embracing slowness and complexity. and it's part of who we are, and that's why we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Kate and for David. From a different perspective, do you think that co-creational communication can be a game changer for fundraising success?
Yeah, I'm going to try and just go back to the previous question and offer a perspective on that, if I may, as well.
Sure, sure.
Because I feel like one of the narratives that we could more helpfully challenge at the moment is this idea of scarcity, and framing the world through the lens of budget cuts is speaking to a particular subset of people working in aid and development. I've been very struck over recent months by the number of community organizations, the number of Global South organizations who say this change in the funding landscape makes no difference to us. We never saw any of this money anyway. It was all absorbed in the international parts of the system. And actually the abundance of people doing extraordinary work in incredibly difficult places is another story we could tell ourselves, and another way in which I think people working across different parts of the system could engage with much more energy, and be much more in collaboration. In Nadia, to your point about amplifying what is there, not letting people tell their stories, but maybe getting out of the way so that those stories are heard, feels important to me. So that probably gives a clue as to my answer to the second question, which is yes, my bias is absolutely that co-creation will lead to stronger fundraising, because I think it will tell a much more authentic, true version of what kind of changes are needed to make the planet a better place for all of us to occupy, and that people with money will be more inclined to contribute to that if they understand and they're brought along with a version of change and of agency that they can be part of and partner to, but don't feel that they just have an obligation because some poor people or somebody is asking on behalf of some people that they identify as poor or they understand to be poor.
Thank you so much. And maybe David, what's your opinion?
I totally agree with everything that Kate has said. I think that, co-creation and authenticity is really needed right now. To some extent, that comes at a cost. It's not cheap to begin with. There are setup costs to do that. But then you've got to balance that against what you were doing in the past, whether you were flying in people from whatever country that you were doing and paying for translators and paying for fixers and doing all that kind of thing. Technology has changed, and capacity has changed, and knowledge has changed, and there are so many fantastic people all over the world that are really good storytellers. Why wouldn't you use somebody local? And why wouldn't you work with that community to co-create? I wouldn't understand why you wouldn't do that. However, as I said, there is an initial cost, and I think you've got to get through that. You've got to learn from your mistakes, and you've got to build up some kind of framework so that you can do things more effectively and efficiently in the future. So the people that do it are going to be brave, but I think they're the ones that are going to be the winners in the end. But the most important thing is that the real stories are being heard, and I think through that money will be raised.
Thank you so much. And referring to a question of Isabella, who refers to the existing methodology of doing picturing or visual communication within the communities. And so we have in there the program people So in the NGOs, the program people, they have experience for 30 years already in this methodology. Also for assessing the projects, doing project work, etc. And what exactly is needed to convince the decision makers in communication in NGOs to simply to go to use this experience the program people have in co-working and collaborating with the participants in the projects instead of refusing it? You laugh, David.
I'll have a go at answering that, because I'm thinking about something that I've been doing today, because I've been working on a film today with somebody that doesn't really have much knowledge of film production. And so there's teething problems again. So what I would say is, in co-creation, you need all of those different experts available for it to go smoothly, because the programs team have got the expertise in the field, but they might not have the expertise of pulling together a participatory program, for example, of photography or video or whatever it needs to be. And you need professional editors if you're actually editing a film. I asked somebody a question today. I said, what's the final length of this film going to be? And this was to the filmmaker. Who said, I don't know. And I went, okay, so you've shot 6 interviews so far, you've got 2 more planned, and you don't even know if it's a 90-second or a 90-minute video. That would have been the first question I asked. So I think you need all that expertise in the room, and you do need to learn from each other. So by all means, you really do need to involve the programmatic team, but you need some comms people as well. That's my view.
Mm-hmm. And maybe to you, Pramantayo and Reina, how important was it in this project with Urbamondo for you to have this kind of liberty to feel also this trust that you have the liberty to form the story and to do the story on the field together with the people? How important was this? Was this trust for you?
I think I'll answer that, Riani, if you don't mind. I think we, to be honest, had a lot of experience in working with other NGOs that have like a strict agenda on how their program wants to be portrayed. And unfortunately, most of that really does not reflect what's going on the field, like with all these stories that is so unique and rich, but they get missed out on because that does not cover like a certain requirement from the NGOs or like the clients that we have. And so when this project happened, and with the amount of trust that Urbamon and Fairpicture gave us, we have the opportunity to kind of collaborate with the people on the ground as well, like with UPC and with the other characters, to make sure that it's also their film, like the kind of messages that they also wanted to convey, as much as it's our film. We kind of have like this collaborative thing going on with our protagonist, and I think that's became very important for us throughout the whole process. What do you think, Riani? Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think yeah, you said it perfectly. I think it was very great that we were that freedom allowed us to explore not only from our side but also especially from the protagonist side, as I think it's very important to have it's their story that they're telling, so we're able to capture that story according to how they want to be portrayed in the film. So it's very, like, we were very grateful that we were given that freedom as well, that we don't always get in other cases. But yeah.
Thank you so much. And you mentioned before also that you emphasized a lot on the informed consent while doing this production. And what exactly does it mean for the people? What exactly does it mean that for you to work with this instrument also, as I've understood, of informed consent?
I think the main thing that most other clients don't realize in Indonesia when they required us to have like written consents or, with their like I guess like law speak, like law terms, very advanced, words that it's really hard to explain that to people because media literacy in Indonesia is not quite as high as the ones in Western countries, for example. They don't know what's going to happen with the film afterwards, how it's going to impact them, how it's going to affect their lives. So it really is important for us to basically emphasize how they are going to be portrayed. Because sometimes if we talked about more sensitive topics, like when we talk about eviction, it really became, some of the people became very cautious of us, so that also helps us, like by explaining what we're going to do with the film, we gain their trust and their consent is like, as an extension of that. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for this so much interesting conversation. As we are over the time, I don't want to end this discussion without a wrap up. And that would be in the sense of, it seems like we are all agreed in this room. We all have this perspective, but in a few words for our panelists, what continues to challenge us at the time of work in upholding ethics at scale? Kate mentioned the idea of scarcity, also David about costs. But yeah, to just summarize in a few words, what is still challenging us in this sense? Who wants to go? Anyone wants to go?
I'll give it in one word: time.
Sorry?
Time, I would say.
Okay. Yes, interesting. Kate, any thoughts on this?
Just, I feel enormous privilege in being able to hear the stories and the realities from many different places in the world, and I feel the responsibility of the power I have to share those. So I would encourage other people to be curious and responsible with the stories that you're using. Thank you.
Interesting, thank you. Any other of our panelists wants to share these wrap-up words? If not, we will go to the, we'll finalize this conversation, inviting you to join our community at Fairpicture. We are very active on LinkedIn, and you can also join our newsletter. The links are there, and you can reach out to Nadine for personal conversation. And we are really thankful with our panelists, our team, our community for this FairTalk. And yeah, very excited on continuing working for making this impact. Thank you so much for joining us.